charged with attempted murder and Hey,
this is The Hill on News Nation. Tens of thousands, if not more, expected in Arizona this weekend. The memorial service for Charlie Kirk also receiving the highest level of federal security. We'll take you live to Arizona in moments ahead of the weekend service and the president's eulogy. And here in Washington, a vote to honor Kirk's memory, but roughly half of Democratic lawmakers refusing to sign on. The president reacting this way moments ago.
Just today, the House Democrats voted against condemning the political assassination of Charlie Kirk. Who could vote against condemning all this saying, please condemn the assassination of a human being? And they said, no, we're not going to do that.
Also tonight, tear gas in the Windy City. Law enforcement breaking up big protests against ICE. We are live on the ground in moments as demonstrations pick up in other spots across the country as well. Plus, did President Biden's chief of staff want the president to take a cognitive test after that historic and devastating debate? The reporting tonight about what Jeff Zients reportedly told lawmakers this week behind closed doors. But first tonight, here from the Hill, a live look as you see it there, Utah Valley University. A vigil set to take place ahead of this weekend's memorial service in Arizona to remember Charlie Kirk. Now, this is the State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona here, home to the NFL's Arizona Cardinals. The 63,000-seat stadium expected to be filled by Charlie Kirk's family and friends, Turning Point USA colleagues, supporters from all over the country, including the biggest names in politics. Among the speakers, for example, these folks here. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, the HHS Secretary, Robert Kennedy Jr., Susie Wiles, you never really see or hear from her. She's the chief of staff at the White House. She'll be among the speakers. So too, of course, Erica Kirk, the widow of Charlie Kirk. Vice President J.D. Vance, a close friend of Charlie Kirk's, and President Trump, as I mentioned, speaking as well. We begin tonight live in Glendale, outside the Turning Point USA headquarters, with our Kelly Meyer, who is there for us this evening tonight. Kelly?
Yeah, hey there, Blake. So if this is any indication of what it may look like on Sunday, we know the crowd's been coming out here all day long, so we are anticipating many, many, many more to come on Sunday. As you said, there is upwards of 60,000 people that can be filled in that stadium, and they already have an overflow room ready. And we've seen people, we've been out here since 6 a.m. this morning, Blake, and the crowds continue to come through, leave flowers, balloons. I was just talking with the family that came from Idaho. They drove down from Idaho, and they said they didn't know him, but they wanted to be here to pay their respects. They're also here at the same time for the birth of their next grandchild. It really shows the circle of life. But everybody out here today, there's people praying, emotional. But of course, security is on a lot of folks' minds. We know that there was a suspicious bag that was found outside here of Turning Point headquarters just 2 days ago. It was deemed safe, but we know they are taking all the precautions. As you said, Blake, they have the highest level of security this weekend, the level of what you would see at the State of the Union or presidential inaugurations. So they are taking any threats very seriously, Blake.
Kelly, it strikes me that you say that folks are showing up from several states away who didn't even know him. And as you talk to people there on the ground, I wonder what the common thread is as you hear from them tonight.
Yeah, I think a lot of people here have that same kind of sentiment, that they just didn't know him personally, but that they wanted to be here. And that was similar to what we were hearing from folks in Washington at the beginning of the week at that vigil at the Kennedy Center, and folks just wanting to feel that sense of community that they feel when they came out here, when they came out to the Kennedy Center, when they come out here to outside of Turning Point headquarters. I also saw folks praying. So you see people really coming out and just really coming together and grieving together. And that's the sense that we're getting ahead of this weekend and what we expect on Sunday. Just the amount of people that want to come in. I'm expecting many more from outside of the state of Arizona. But of course, this was where he spent much of his adult life, and of course, outside of where Turning Point headquarters is right now, Blake.
Kelly Meyer in Phoenix, Arizona for us tonight in the Phoenix area. Kelly, thank you. Authorities are raising the security level, as you heard Kelly mention there, for the service on Sunday. The Department of Homeland Security, for example, designating it as a level 1 event. the same designation that they would give to the Super Bowl, for example. With us now, Officer Moroni Mendez. He is a public information officer, Glendale, Arizona Police Department, there for us in his hometown tonight. Officer, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. I know that the stadium seats like 63,000. They can expand it up to in the 70s. But I read somewhere that you might be expecting way more than that, 100,000 plus. Is that indeed what you're anticipating heading into this?
Yeah, it's a very, very real possibility. You know, you mentioned it yourself. The stadium can hold upwards of 60,000 guests, and not to mention we have the Desert Diamond Arena available for overflow. So just considering those numbers, plus anyone that might be in the surrounding area, we could be well into the hundreds of thousands for sure.
What are you expecting for Sunday?
We're expecting a lot of people, a lot of congestion. It's a warm state also, so it's going to be pretty warm. We are in the cooling temperatures now, but we want everyone to stay hydrated and stay in the shade. But we're expecting to be busy, and our main priority, our top concern, is keeping everyone safe.
You're not used to you are used to big events out there in Arizona. Obviously, you've got an NFL team. The Super Bowl was just there recently. You're a Super Bowl town. That's a Super Bowl event. On the security front, for folks who are attending there, what would you like to tell them? What should they be expecting as well?
What we'd like to tell anyone that's going to be in the area on Sunday is Glendale is no stranger to these big major events. You mentioned it yourself. You know, we've had multiple Super Bowls here. We've had big names as far as artists and hosting their concerts here. So Glendale has a lot of experience dealing with these type of safety procedures. We were mentioning earlier, this is what's considered a Tier 1 designated event, meaning it's top priority, top security, both locally, statewide, and federally. We're going to have a lot of federal partners here, a lot of federal law enforcement agencies helping us to ensure that this event is safe.
Officer Moroni Mendez, appreciate the time, sir, ahead of this event on Sunday with us tonight here on the Hill. Thank you, sir. Best of luck out there. Meantime, up on Capitol Hill, the House passing a resolution to honor the life and legacy of Charlie Kirk and condemn political violence. How much have we heard about that over the last week and a half? Republicans passing this unanimously. Democrats, the vote actually split. 95 voting yes, 38 voting present, 58 voting no. The House Speaker, Mike Johnson, reacting this way.
The House of Representatives calls upon all Americans to reject political violence, recommit to respectful debate, uphold American values, and respect one another as fellow Americans. Sadly, a number of Democrats could not bring themselves to vote for that.
Democrats who voted against this measure, pushing back, for example, the Mississippi Congressman Benny Thompson saying, quote, "My deep regret that Mr. Kirk was killed, and my respect of his First Amendment right to express himself freely does not make him someone that should be elevated as a role model," adding that the resolution, in his view, is, quote, "intentionally written to be divisive." With me now here on the Hill, host of the Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, Chris Stirewalt, with us on this Friday. Hello, sir.
Sure.
Hakeem Jeffries voted for this, the top Democrat in the House. He did not. He basically told members, vote your conscience. What does it say to you tonight, Chris, that this was in one sense, party line vote, I guess you can say?
Well, we have not had a problem with either party covering themselves in honor of late. This has not been a good or dignified time for either of our political parties. I certainly understand that Hakeem Jeffries voting for that is cover for the swing district Democrats who needed to vote for it, where it could be used against them in their. He voted against this to make them sound more radical. But the way I read the language, and it was written in a way that would make it hard for Democrats to vote for it, right? It was not a neutrally drafted, like, they could have written one that said political. It's like the the second impeachment of Donald Trump, right? Democrats could have written it in a way that would have gotten a bunch of Republican votes, but they didn't do it that way. They wanted it to be they wanted to force Republicans to not be able to vote for it. And this one, there was extra verbiage in there that made it more challenging for liberal Democrats or progressive Democrats. So Hakeem Jeffries votes for it to give the swing district guys cover, and here we are.
There might be some folks that say, come on, just vote for it. Send a message. We all need to come together.
It would be good. It would be
good, right?
It would be good if everybody could act like a grown-up. It would be good if the Republicans had drafted it in a more neutral way. It would be good if the Democrats had voted for it anyway. It would be good if people could just stop treating Charlie Kirk like he is a meme or a tool to be used to try to hurt one side or hurt the other side, a weapon of fear and all of this other stuff. As I'm watching this, when you hear Kelly talk to the people who have shown up at this memorial, when we think about who's going to show up on Sunday, this was a flesh and blood living human being, right? Like every human being, an imperfect human being, but a flesh and blood human being who had a substantial effect on the way that American politics and discourse worked. And I'm afraid that that is getting lost in the fact of people trying to find political utility in his murder.
You teed me up perfectly because I wanted to ask you about Sunday, and obviously it's going to be incredibly emotional. Erica Kirk we'll hear from. There will be politicians of the highest level there. But for the conservative movement going forward, for example, we heard or saw the news this week of Erica Kirk becoming the head of Turning Point USA going forward. Where does that movement head now going forward as you see it? There were two at the end of Charlie Kirk's life. There were two main thrusts of Turning Point USA and of his work. And one was the successful project, Donald Trump elected president again in 2024, and as youth movement organizing group. And then the other one was a successor to programs that were like Teen Challenge, Campus Crusade for Christ. He was becoming more of an evangelist than he was a political organizer. And I think you saw that dichotomy. That will be the tension there on Sunday. Is this going to be a coming together, or will partisan politics come into it? Is this going to be that side of Turning Point, or are we going to hear voices about what's wrong with Democrats and the radical left? And what's the president and the vice president going to say? I hope, for everybody's sake, that the side of Charlie Kirk that was about trying to bring people to faith and bring people together is what gets the highlight, not what people think is wrong with people who vote differently. Chris Stirewalt, catch you later in the hour. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, still to come. Here on the Hill, by the way, programming note for this weekend, special coverage of the memorial service for Charlie Kirk. Sunday here on News Nation, 1 o'clock Eastern. We hope to see you then. But before then, and still to come here tonight, have you seen this? A showdown outside of an immigration facility in Chicago. Our News Nation cameras rolling as protesters clash with federal guards. We are live in the Windy City, what Allie Bradley saw firsthand. Plus, speaking of, who knew what and when? Did the president's chief of staff testify that he wanted a cognitive test? Mick Mulvaney, Dan Cannonen with us later in the hour. We thank you for being with us tonight here on the Hill. I hope you're having a good Friday. It's a Friday after all. I'm Blake Burman. Stay with us. We'll see you in 4.
Pods.com.
That's just some of the scene. Protesters and police clashing outside Chicago today over the president's immigration raids. ICE saying it has arrested some 400 illegal immigrants in Illinois since launching what they call Operation Midway Blitz about 2 weeks ago. The operation leading to charges from some of excessive force, but the Trump administration says the president is fulfilling a campaign promise of mass deportations. Our Allie Bradley has been the one witnessing this all. She's in Broadview. It's about 12 miles to the west there of downtown. Allie, I've been watching your video all day. What's it like there? And for those who haven't seen it, show us.
Yeah, it's one of those things where right now it's quiet, but anything can happen like that. And that is what we just witnessed, was one woman who was impeding law enforcement from leaving the facility, and she repeatedly stood in front of the vehicles blocking those vehicles. They deployed multiple pepper balls at her. She went to the ground at one point after an altercation ensued with one of those federal officials, and then they actually ended up arresting her and taking her into custody. Now, she is the fourth protester that was arrested here today. We've been here since around 6 o'clock this morning, so we've been watching this all unfold, and from tires being slashed to protesters jumping on the hoods of federal vehicles to them hitting the federal vehicles. This is something that we've been seeing all day long, but it is that kind of ebb and flow. Right now, it's quiet. There's only about 30 individuals here, but they are calling for more protesters to show up around 6:30 when people get off work. So we'll be here. We'll be continuing to monitor that, but they're protesting Trump's immigration efforts down here in the Chicago area. And the reality here is they're not doing what they were doing in Los Angeles that really brought on those riots that we saw in Paramount. They're not doing those Home Depot immigration sweeps. Instead, they're doing targeted enforcement. We've been along with ICE, and yesterday we were along with Border Patrol, both exclusive ride-alongs. With Border Patrol yesterday, we actually were there as they arrested 2 individuals, and this was like a textbook apprehension. From the moment that they located their target, again, this was a targeted individual with a prior felony for counterfeit. He was on their radar. They knew exactly where he was, what vehicles they drove. They established that pattern of life. When they located their target to the moment that they got him out of the vehicle and put cuffs on him, 3 minutes and 36 seconds. That's how quick it was. They say that is their goal. They don't want to go in these communities and disrupt the community. That's not what their goal is here in Chicago. They're trying to arrest the worst of the worst, Blake, and that is what they're doing on the streets of Chicago right now. Again, we have not seen those sweeping raids just yet.
Did you lose your voice because of the tear gas?
Yeah, a little bit. We've been taking on some tear gas, and of course, we're downwind from the pepper balls, and that's been going on all day. So, you know, we've been going live since early this morning. There's some activity going on behind us right here. We're going to keep an eye on this, Blake. If anything does crop up here, we'll flag you guys and we'll jump back in. But right now, we know that an ICE vehicle just went in a transport van, and you can see the protesters kind of gathering towards the fence right now. Again, anything can happen, but they're very quick to deploy those pepper balls. You can hear over the loudspeaker regularly down here, too, saying that call for an order for dispersal, saying that these individuals are violating the law. They're obstructing federal enforcement from being able to do their jobs, Blake. So these people right now, they're on the federal property. They're not, if they go off that sidewalk, they're what DHS is saying, they're trespassing. So that's the reality down here on the ground, Blake.
Allie, you and your crew stay safe out there. Our Allie Bradley.
Thank you.
Always appreciate it. Allie, thank you. Well, similar immigration raids also happening in cities across the country. Agents rounding up who they say committed crimes while living illegally here in the U.S. In New York City, for example, 11 local officials, including the comptroller and the public advocate, among the protesters arrested for blocking the entrance to an ICE facility. With me now, former communications aide to Senator Lindsey Graham, T.W. Origi, and Chris Hahn, News Nation political contributor, host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast. Hahn, T.W., hello, guys. Happy Friday. Hahn, I'm going to start with you up there in New York. This was the White House statement to News Nation. Assaulting law enforcement officers or interfering with operations is a crime. Anyone who breaks the law will be held accountable. Democrats must turn down the volume, stop siding with criminal illegal aliens over American law enforcement officers, and tell their supporters to stop the violence. What say you?
Democrats are not supporting violence. Full stop. Donald Trump needs to stop blaming Democrats for 20 people showing up in front of an ICE facility. And ICE agents didn't need to throw that woman to the ground. They could have taken her pretty easily, but they decided not to. Yeah, she should not have pushed the cop the way she did. I saw it. Didn't look good. But it didn't look good the way they overreacted to it either. And yeah, I believe everybody needs to tone it down in this country right now. I think we're in a place in our country that is very fraught with danger, and we all need to be aware of it. And people are going to protest. That's America. That's what we do here. They should do it peacefully. And the law enforcement charged with moving them out of the way should pick them up and move them out of the way. They shouldn't be throwing them to the ground like that. That's ridiculous.
TW?
Yeah, look, I don't doubt these protesters' sympathy in this issue, but I have very, very little patience to standing in the way of the men and women of ICE or law enforcement in general, people who are getting doxxed for simply carrying out the law. Look, as the report just said, these are targeted pickups by ICE. And I was just going through the list of some people who were arrested in New York, who were arrested in Chicago. This is a rap sheet that includes murder, sexual assault of minors, crimes that run the gamut of illegality. Violence is one of the common threads. Look, if we want anyone to blame for this heightened tension with ICE, it's Joe Biden. You can't get immigration reform if you don't address the border.
You're really going to go all the way back to Biden?
Well, if the border and the amount of illegal immigrants in this country were not as high as it was, it would not be, there wouldn't be as heavy of an impetus to do these actions.
I mean, I know what you said, Chris, about the scene and that one woman and the police and ICE, but I mean, look at the video here. These ICE officers, these are Americans. They just show up to work Monday to Friday, do what they're told.
Yeah, look, the president politicized this, period.
Okay.
I mean, and there are a lot of people who are upset about the actions they're taking. And I don't think anybody's got a problem with targeting criminals and people who have major crime records. That's not the problem. The problem is he politicized this by showing up in Home Depot parking lots and having ICE agents jump out of a Ryder truck and take people who are looking for a day's work, picking up guys who are managing McDonald's and bagel stores here in New York. So yeah, people are getting annoyed by it, and yeah, that means that when they're doing the right thing, they may also get protested. And that's on the President of the United States and no one else.
We'll leave it there, Han. I'll catch you next week. TW, see you later in the show. Appreciate it, guys. Talk soon.
See you later.
Of course. All right, other side of the break. Mick Mulvaney, Dan Cannon. Testimony behind closed doors. Did the White House Chief of Staff want Joe Biden to get a cognitive test after that disastrous debate? What we're learning tonight.
It's 9 today.
All right, 6:30 here on the East Coast this Friday night. Hope you're having a good one. How about this question? Did President Biden's Chief of Staff call for a cognitive test after the president's devastating debate performance against President Trump? Now, according to several reports tonight, Jeff Zients, he was President Biden's final Chief of Staff. According to those reports, Zients pushed for just that, according to testimony he gave to the House Oversight Committee Thursday. There are also reports that Zients testified that he witnessed Biden's decision-making slowing down toward the end of his presidency. He had trouble with memory lapses and needed an additional meeting to make decisions. Now, it's important to note the transcript of Zients' testimony has not yet been released. Also tonight, questions about Biden's vice president, Kamala Harris, revealing that she didn't prefer Tim Walz as her running mate, writing in her new book that she wanted instead to select Pete Buttigieg. But she says she was concerned that the country wouldn't accept a black woman and a gay man in the Oval Office. Buttigieg reacting this way.
I was surprised when I read that. I just believe in giving Americans more credit than that. My experience in politics has been that the way that you earn trust with voters is based mostly on what they think you're going to do for their lives, not on categories.
All right, wanted to talk to two guys who know a thing or two about these things. Mick Mulvaney, former Chief of Staff in the first Trump administration, NewsNation contributor, of course, and Dan Cannon, Battleground States Director for both the Biden and Harris campaigns. Gentlemen, happy Friday. I saw the story. I was like, I got to talk to Dan. I got to talk to Mick. Mulvaney, I'm going to start with you because you have the perspective of a Chief of Staff. It read to me, and again, this was a deposition behind closed doors. We haven't seen the full transcripts. But it read to me that Jeff Zients, if he indeed wanted Joe Biden to get a cognitive test, seemingly was trying to do the right thing. Am I onto something there?
Well, I think it's the right thing for the job. I mean, if any chief of staff sees a president and believes them to be incapacitated, you've got some duties. And if he did say this, I think it's probably a reasonable thing for him to have done at the time. I do not think in any way, shape, or form that Zients is trying to knife his former boss. I've seen some suggestions of that on the internet. He came down. It sounds like he testified openly. By the way, the simple fact he testified, I think is interesting. He could have taken the fifth, as other members of the Biden administration did, or he could have claimed executive privilege like other members of the Trump administration have in the past, but he chose to testify, and I respect that, and I would imagine that there was no political motivation here. He was just telling people exactly what he thought, and if he thought the boss needed an exam, that's probably not unreasonable.
Dan, you know Zients. Yeah. You know the former president well. You know Kamala Harris well, obviously, as well. What is your read on the reports tonight?
Well, I do think Mick is right that Zients is not trying to knife, his boss. He's not that kind of guy, and I don't think that would be his motivation in this sort of setting. And taking the time to actually give the testimony and not plead the Fifth, I think, does speak well of the former chief of staff. Andrew Bates also just testified, did not take the Fifth, so it's not just Zients in the Biden cadre who's been doing that. But I don't think we know enough about what he was thinking at the time and what he pushed for. I wasn't in that kind of room to understand that conversation. It seems very plausible to me that this could also have been simply about political inoculation. If we thought that there was this question and this political debate about Biden, put it to bed with the test, and for one reason or the other that didn't happen. I don't know if it was about his legitimate concern or if it was about a political point there. But I do think he was probably trying to be judicious with his testimony and be honest about what he was thinking at the time.
Kamala Harris going scorched earth cannon, and why?
I don't know, and I'm not going to go scorched earth back on her. I will say that. I will say this. I think that the secretary, Pete Buttigieg, put a great statement out there when he simply said, it's not about categories, it's about delivering for people. I think it's a great lesson across all of it. And, there are a lot of folks in that book that took a jab or two for one reason or the other, but I think it's in everyone's best interest not to take the bait on this stuff and focus back on the issues the American people care about. Pete did a great job of that.
But you say take the bait on it. She put it out there. So I guess it begs the question, why?
Well, 107 days, in some ways a lot happens and maybe not that much happens in terms of a book. And so I think this could be interesting for people to read about. And she clearly is being honest, in her reflections on what she felt at the time. I think some of that stuff probably did not need to get said. I would offer. Right. And I've got more thoughts on that, but I'll leave it to myself.
Okay. Mulvaney, what do you think's going on here? It kind of makes me wonder if this is the tact. It politically it brings up a question, right? Does this mean she's done with politics, or is she trying to sort of throw it all out there so that she can run again?
Absolutely not done with politics. In a way, Blake, I'm sort of uncomfortable with doing this with the Zients piece because I'm going to say something and I don't want to reflect on what I just said on Zients. Zients is not out trying to knife Biden, and I absolutely believe that. I think there's no politics, I think, of what I've heard about Zients. Everybody else is trying to knife Biden. They're trying to explain why Kamala Harris lost. They're trying to blame Joe Biden. We've seen stories this week about how Biden's team can't raise any money for the library because no donors want to give him money. Everybody's blaming him. They're falling over each other to blame Biden so that they all have political futures.
But are they also, in a way, coming after Kamala Harris? Because here was Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, who we know wants to run for president or be president one day. Here's what he said on the Stephen A. Smith show.
She's going to have to answer to how she was in the room and yet never said anything publicly. I was very vocal with him privately and extremely vocal with his staff about my concerns about his fitness to be able to run for another term. I was direct with them. I told them my concerns. I told them my worries. I told them what I was seeing in the polls.
Dan, I'm sitting there watching it and I'm going, wait a minute. She was wrong for not saying something publicly, but I was right for telling people something privately. I don't understand how any of that squares.
Burman, you had it. Burman, you had it at the beginning when you said he wants to run for president. That's what this is about.
Well, yeah. And look, I will just say, whether it's Shapiro or whether it's Harris, there's just no need to relitigate this, in my view. I think it's a very simple thing, and as much as we want to make this seem like a bigger drama than it was, there were three choices for Democrats in 2023 going into 2024. Keep with Biden and hope the fastball is still there, go to Harris, who you're not sure can get the job done, or throw an open primary into the mix. And that was a disaster for us in 2019. That open primary was a nightmare. And of those three options, none were perfect. We went with hoping the fastball was still there. Turns out it wasn't. That's kind of the end of story. I don't think we need to keep relitigating this ad nauseum.
Okay. On that note, we'll let Mulvaney get down to Duval Street, live from our Concord Public Bureau tonight. Mick, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. We'll catch you next week. Dan,
happy
see you
weekend,
back here.
guys.
Yeah, you too. Dan, later in the show.
Thank you.
All right, still to come, the House of Representatives today, honoring Charlie Kirk, but not everyone.
His rhetoric and beliefs were ignorant, uneducated, and sought to disenfranchise millions of Americans.
You heard it there from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez criticizing the conservative activist ahead of this weekend's memorial service. Where does the left head from here? And as Turning Point USA names its leader, where does that movement head from here as well when we return?
Congratulations.
Megyn Kelly joins American journalist Batya Ungar-Sargon for the premiere of Batya.
They're the only ones who can police their side and get us back to decency as the default.
Premiere Saturday, 4/3 Central, only on News Nation.
Wealth Management.
All right, welcome back here to the Hill on News Nation. State Farm Stadium, Glendale, Arizona, where the memorial service for Charlie Kirk will take place over the weekend on Sunday. Expected to speak at the service, in addition, of course, to Kirk's widow, Erica, President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, who was friends, good friends with Charlie Kirk, and the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Now taking a look at the headquarters of Turning Point USA headquarters, the memorial, as we've seen really day after day here, continuing to grow, serving as a spot for conservatives around the country to just come and sort of pay their respects, look back on Kirk's life and his work for the conservative cause. But now to the other side of the aisle for a moment. Back here in Washington today, the Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez speaking about Kirk today on the House floor.
We should be clear about who Charlie Kirk was. A man who believed that the Civil Rights Act that granted Black Americans the right to vote was a mistake. His rhetoric and beliefs were ignorant, uneducated, and sought to disenfranchise millions of Americans.
She was one of 58 Democrats who voted against a resolution honoring the life and legacy of Charlie Kirk. 38 others voted present, meaning they decided to stay silent. Full panel here with me now. T.W. Rigi, Vice President of Push Digital Group. Jessica Taylor with us, Cook Political Report with Amy Walter. That's who she's with, of course. Chris Stirewalt, host of the Hill Sunday Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and Dan Cannon back with us, former Battleground States Director for the Biden and Harris campaigns. Happy Friday, friends. Thanks for being with me tonight. Appreciate it. This weekend, the memorial service there for Charlie Kirk. What do you expect to hear from the president, TW, and where do you think what Charlie Kirk built over more than a decade heads from here going forward, as we learned this week that his wife will take over the helm?
Yeah, look, if assassinations throughout history teach us anything, it's that when you kill a leader with a huge following, it doesn't stifle the movement. The movement tends to grow bigger. I think for people of a certain age, I'm even outside the age demographic, we understate the massive amount of difference he made on college campuses and among young people around the country. That's a big reason why Donald Trump saw so many young voters shift in his direction this past cycle. So I think you're going to see Donald Trump thank him to highlight the great good he did for the conservative movement and chart a course for how to continue it into the future. And by the way, AOC.
We'll get there in a second. We'll get there.
All right, I'll hold my fire.
Yeah, you can hold it there. What do you expect to hear out of the president? And where do you think, as from the other side of the aisle, what he built? What are you watching going forward?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think TW is correct, and I can, as an operative, look at what Charlie Kirk built from Turning Point's perspective on college campuses and say that was an incredibly effective political machine, and it got him on stage with Trump. It got him a star in politics of his own right. And I do think that in some ways Democrats who are responding to this may miss some of the legitimate sort of bubbling up of all of this concern about Kirk because he was such a hero to so many on that side of the movement. As much as I disagree with his posture and his rhetoric, that's undeniably potent and powerful. And I just hope that when the president goes, and I don't have a lot of hope for this, Blake, but I hope that he would use a moment of some kind of reconciliation in his rhetoric. Mike Pence, I think, very wisely said we should resist putting Americans on trial in moments like this. And it's not a moment to divide. It was one person who pulled the trigger here, who should be repudiated by all sides. And we shouldn't be going after Americans of any stripe or persuasion because of that person's violent crime. We should be bringing people together in this moment.
I think what I was really struck by when I think back to sort of the violence that I've seen even just in my career covering things, I think back to Gabrielle Giffords.
Yeah.
And that moment after she was shot, it was just a few weeks before the State of the Union. You had Republicans and Democrats coming together. They were sort of this like bipartisan dates almost, they were calling them, of who they were going to sit with. There was it wasn't talk about ideology or anything. It was just that this is a moment like this is wrong no matter what happens. And that's over 10 years ago now, and we're in a very different place in the country. And I'm not surprised by sort of the way the rhetoric has divided in the week and a half since that this has happened.
There's a social media meme, say the weird thing. You've seen say the weird thing?
I haven't seen it.
Okay, so say the weird thing, and then you play that clip, and then you say you're crazy, that you like to have donuts in the bathtub or whatever your weird thing is.
Right.
We have a politics where people like AOC and Donald Trump and everybody else are like, it's a race to see who can be awful first, who can get to awful as quickly as possible, because there is engagement there, right? There's television ratings, there's clicks, there's all of that stuff. Can I get there first? The idea that you would go into the House, we know why the Republicans wrote it the way that they wrote it. Yep. They were trolling Democrats. Got it, understand, stipulate, all of that stuff. It would have cost her nothing to say nothing. It would have cost her absolutely nothing to say, today's probably not the day to go out and read out a litany of what's wrong with Charlie Kirk. We should probably let that go. But she didn't let it go because it will help her run for president, because it will raise her money, and it will send all the right signals. And the reason that I think Dan is right not to be too optimistic about a kumbaya moment in the desert on Sunday is that there's too much advantage for J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, and other people to politicize it and turn it into an anti-democratic rally.
Dan, we played the soundbite. There's also a report out today that Ocasio-Cortez's team is preparing her for either a run for the Senate or for the presidency.
Yep.
Given what she said on the House floor today, what do you make of her and how Democrats should be handling this right now at this moment?
I think there's two imperatives in politics for Democrats at the moment that they're a bit in conflict.
Okay.
One is the fight.
Right.
People want to fight. They want what Gavin Newsom did in redistricting, to find some leverage, whatever it is, and go toe-to-toe with Trump and Republicans and actually fight. The shutdown piece, if that happens, is going to be about that. The other imperative is, I think, down the road, to turn the page. I just really believe that through this period of time, we're going to get to a moment in 2027, heading into 2028, where it could feel a lot like 2007, 2008, and not a change election exactly, but a turn-the-page election where it's really about bringing people together in that kind of way. Andy Beshear talks about this all the time. His response on Kirk did not do what AOC did. You know, he from his podium as the governor of Kentucky talked about the need to bring people together and honored Kirk's life as a father and a husband. And so AOC is, I think, picking up on the fight part, not the turn-the-page part.
Well, I think it's positioning for the presidency. She has a huge platform now. Being a junior senator from New York, I don't think is that big of a bump for her. But look, I think, Chris, you're exactly right. It would have cost her nothing to say nothing.
Right.
But it is at the core of what she is saying that I find so troubling. It's the yes, oh, he was so bad he got shot. But did you know he said blah, 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 blah. And the problem with that is I would bet my life AOC hasn't watched more than 5 minutes of Charlie Kirk in any capacity. She's never watched a full debate of his. I don't think she's ever seen more than a snippet that came up on her social media account. I have been heartened by what I've seen on social media by different pundits and people on the left who said, wow, I watched him for the first time and I came away with a different opinion. I find it to be soulless. I actually think it would have cost her nothing to vote for the resolution. I agree. She said, well, we had all these different resolutions. I would have voted for all of them. Right. It costs nothing to be kind. So I think, especially now in the wake of Jimmy Kimmel and everyone freaking out about censorship, yet we make a whataboutism argument about the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I find it disgusting.
That's okay.
I think to Dan's point, when I'm looking at the primaries for 2026, I think this will carry over into 2028, is Democrats are wanting someone that fights for them. That's why I'm looking at how Chuck Schumer postures himself in this shutdown. Yeah. Does he capitulate again? Because that is not what the base wants. And, you know, there's also a very real chance in some of these primaries that you have candidates that are positioning themselves more as the fighters. You know, Graham Plattner in Maine, Mallory McMorrow in Michigan, that are sort of going against the establishment candidates. Are they the type of person that they want? And I think in 2028, it is someone like they like that Gavin Newsom is pushing back. And I think that the base also likes what AOC says.
I'll give you the last word and tell me who's on your show.
This is why you're trying to steal her from us on the Sunday show. So we have Jessica on the Sunday show.
I respect you too much,
not on the panel, and here you are trying to drag her.
I'm available all week. I'm available all week.
I'm hurt. I'm hurt. No, look, the Democratic Party has to go through it. It's going to be wrenching. It's going to be challenging, but I think Gavin Newsom jumping out to this early lead has created the pressure on Cortez, who had a nice situation. She had a good, she was the Bernie designee. She was doing the Ro Khanna swing. She was doing West Coast swing like she was a PGA golfer. And she had all this good stuff happening for her. And then Gavin Newsom came in and sucked up all the oxygen, and now she's got to do something to get back in it.
All right, who you got this weekend real quick?
We're going to be live from Arizona. We got a couple of Congress members. We got all that kind of stuff. It's
all the good stuff. Best Sunday show in the biz. Steyerwalt, 10 a.m. for the Hill Sunday. Thank y'all. Appreciate it. Hope you have a great weekend. Still to come. On the other side, a big sign that America is still good at heart. I'll explain. All right, if you're just getting home, trying to check up on today's top stories, here's some of what's trending right now on thehill.com. The president says the TikTok deal is done, but the details on that are still TBD. And then there's this. We talked about this in the show. Pete Buttigieg says he was surprised that Kamala Harris is now saying she actually wanted him as her running mate. And check the pantry. Look at this. 12 brands of cinnamon recalled for elevated lead levels. To find out those stories and more, all you have to do is head on over to thehill.com. By the way, scan the QR code for our Hill newsletters. All right, before we sign off tonight, good news from the corner of Wall and Broad. As this week comes to a close, we're looking at markets closing at a record high, green all across the screen. But there's something else that's going on as well that we've seen. Charitable giving is at an all-time high. Giving USA's annual report of philanthropy recently came out, and in 2024, individuals, foundations, and companies gave an estimated $592 billion to charity, up 6.3%, the biggest year since 2020. So in closing tonight, as we head out here on the Hill and as you head off to your weekend, take some time for yourselves, and deservingly so. Keep in mind that collectively, in addition to all the taking, our country is doing a whole lot of giving. That's my take tonight. I thank you so much for watching us here on the Hill. I'm Blake Burman. I hope you have a great weekend. We'll be back here on Monday. Elizabeth Vargas Reports starts right now.